Hi everyone, we're here today with Ivan Saldaña from Casa Lumbre. Great pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming over from Mexico all the way to
My big
Italy
pleasure.
to have this small chat about you. We've got so very many questions to ask you. We don't even know where to start. Usually we start by asking something about your background, like your personal background. Where did you grow up? Like what study did you do? Like something about personal
Yes,
about you.
so I am Mexican. I was born in a city called Guadalajara, which is really close to the tequila region. And I lived there until I was 17. My childhood and teenager times, I was really into nature. So since I was like 15 years old, I was spending my entire summers making like social and natural work like in reserves and in rural areas. And I think that's where my passion for biology started. And agaves were things that eventually became very important in my life, but it's like the regional plant because tequila is so strong, right? So eventually, this connection of what could connect me with my place of origin and my love for biology is what made the connection. I left when I was 17. I traveled a little bit. I went to South America, and I decided to study biology. And my years as a student, I was very active. I was a good student, but also a little bit misbehaved, if you want to say it. So I was very good negotiating stuff. So the university allowed me to do a lot of exchange program. I studied in the University of Las Americas in Mexico, but at the end I finished in McGill University in Montreal, but I was in Chile. I went to Barbados. I was then in an ecological project in the sea, and well, that's kind of how my undergraduate happens. But at the end of my undergraduate degree, plants become a passion, particularly understanding how plants worked, their biology, their biochemistry, and when I finished the undergraduate degree, I was very clear I wanted to study about how plants can cope with difficulties, how they face their destinies attached to that square meter of land, and how that they are able to successfully survive. And that's it. Then the next phase was the PhD. I went to England, to the University of Sussex, a strange place to study agaves, right? One of the rainiest places on earth. But I went to a special unit called the plant stress unit, where they were very good into investigating these kind of questions. I wanted to understand which were the mechanisms that through evolution agave had acquired in order to survive and to be successful in the environment the agaves come from. So I spent almost 5 years there doing fundamental questions in the biology of agave, learning about the substances, the chemistry, the metabolism of the plant. And at some point I finished that PhD, which is a great thing. But I started to have doubts if I really wanted an academic career. And then is when suddenly and surprisingly there was an opportunity to join the industry. They had a lot of issues with blue agaves at the time. There had been a big crisis of agave, and large companies didn't have much knowledge. And I was one of the few guys who could help them to understand better the agave plant.
What was the problem with agave itself?
So then there was a lot of pets going on. People were starting to realize that the genomic diversity of blue agave was very poor. And they also, I mean, the agriculture of it was not really well documented yet. Now we know much more information. There's a lot of institutions in Mexico that has dedicated time to document not only the agriculture of it, but in a more deep manner, the type of sugars these plants accumulate, which are the elements that can tell you if an agave is healthy or not. And during the PhD, I developed some methods to estimate the formation of fructans, the type of sugars that were there. and was some interest in maybe taking the methods I developed into the field. That didn't really happen at the end because I got hired, but the company that originally hired me got into another company, this big merchant acquisition. So I ended up working for a very large company called Pernod Ricard, which offered me a great opportunity to learn. My boss left very soon, so I ended up being very, very young with a lot of responsibility. There were around 80 engineers reporting to me. I was 28 years old, never in my life really worked. And that allowed me to access multiple aspects of the operation. And one of the most wonderful ones was fermenting and distilling. And there is when I discovered that a lot of the things I learned in the plants could actually be translated into the distillate. That things that actually are important in the physiology and the survival of agave plants actually happen to taste and smell incredible, and I could isolate, rediscover them from a different perspective. I moved from the rational to the more sensorial and emotional, if you want, but still focused on those elements that are very unique and wonderful that agaves can offer. And plants, not only agave, are my passion, right? So that eventually my career has been about other plants apart of agave. When that happened, I spent a few years learning. I was in charge of new product development, quality control, multiple areas, but new product development really gained my heart. And I truly wanted to make more than only I was told. Large companies normally are very focused in line extensions, in these kind of things, but I felt I wanted to do more radical innovation. And at the time, at least, it wasn't possible. So eventually I got a very kind divorce, if you want. Like the company and myself, we understood we were not doing a good match. And I became independent. I gave consultancy for quite some time until I met Danny and Moy, my actual partners. They came from a very successful story before. They developed a tequila called Milagro. They developed it for 15 years. They started when they were 23 years old, so really young. And William Grant and Sons took that brand from their hands. So when I met them, they had no brand, but they had money. And that was a great thing, a part of their talent and all the knowledge they accumulated as entrepreneurs. So we partnered, the three of us, to start a new phase in our careers. And the first projects are two very important brands for us, Montelobos Mezcal, and also a Chile liqueur called Ancho Reyes. We launched that in 2012 and 2013. And what was very clear for me was that if this partnership with them was going to be built, my only asking was we will not do only one or two brands. I don't want, like you guys, you spend 15 years in one brand. That's not the kind of, I will not get the satisfaction I'm looking for in terms of professionally. I want to do many brands. And I think we were able to connect our talents. Moy is an incredible businessman, very, very creative in finding ways of solving financial issues and creating schemes, win-win schemes with partners of all sort of kind. And then Danny has this aesthetic ability to understand how a brand can live visually, how the brand should be experienced, right? And my strength is storytelling, is being able to build a congruent, coherent description, definition, and materializing it into a liquid. So these three powers got together. At the beginning, we had a very tiny office we had Betty, who was our assistant. We were 4, Rodrigo 5, and from there we are 500 right now.
Wow.
So we have expanded, we have created brands, different collaborations. We have a company that is dedicated to agriculture, and we have a really strong sustainability program there. We also help other entrepreneurs to create their things. But what is more the core of our business is imagining and identifying the biological, cultural, and sensorial opportunities in Mexico and explaining or presenting them through the products we make.
Wow, what a story.
The introduction. You asked me if I could explain.
That was just the introduction. So let's just go.
I promise to be more brief in the next section.
Let's just go through a few touch points that we're very interested at. First of all, you mentioned very large companies that you work with, you do partnership with. What's your take on the role of very large companies such as multinational, Pernod, Campari, and you name the others, into the mezcal world? Like, did they help mezcal and tequila to be better known worldwide? Did they actually raise the quality of the products, or all the way around, it was just a matter of distribution? And how Casa Lumbre play in this circumstance?
Yeah, thank you. So, well, I can speak. Many of these large companies have invested in brands. Some are not mine, or didn't create it. So I can tell you a little bit of what I can see from my perspective. But the interest of larger companies was a great opportunity to establish a category. Maybe one of the most relevant transactions that happened in the mezcal world was when Del Maguey, which is another brand created by an American guy who was very passionate, an artist actually, Ron Cooper with some other guys. He developed a brand, and Pernod Ricard took the adventure of getting into it. And they did a great job in bringing awareness, particularly in the United States, about the brand. Maybe their marketing and Mexican, they were American. The way they tell the story is very different, of course. The way I look, my country, being mine, is Mexico is also a modern society. Creativity and the present way of doing things is also quite interesting. So I got more focus on that. No? Montelobos is more like an author mezcal that has multiple influence, and we wanted to perfect it. And more than creating a brand that is buying from small producers and reselling, we were super capable of distilling. I mean, that's my profession. This is my core. This is what I have learned. So it has a self-expression of myself through the brand. But if you go to the big companies, yeah, I mean, some of these, particularly those that they are in the share, they sell shares in the open market, not private but public. Campari is an example of that. But no, they have very high standards in many aspects. How easy is that a mezcal brand enters into these standards? That's a different story. The quality, the operations quality, the fairness of the relationship with people, the connection with the raw material and the production of different entrepreneurs that decided to enter in mezcal is very diverse. We were really obsessed in every one of our brands to have a connection direct with the raw material, as that's my subject, that's my passion, the agave plant, to ensure that that was sustainable, and also to envision that if we want to create a medium-sized relevant brand of any of our brands, we have to have a plan in advance, not reacting to the reality, but knowing that we will have to take responsibility of growing agave, responsibility of managing the wastes, for example, of the production units we were producing with, to truly own this and bring a win-win deal for everybody, and minimizing the environmental and social impacts of creating the brands we create. And that is a mindset that is strongly embedded in the essence of what Casa Lumbre is. I mean, I'm Mexican, I've been there in those rural areas. So my wish is that it's great to see our company doing well or investor doing well, but I also would like to see the communities involved doing well and a category doing well. And we have to be an example of that in every brand we do. And I think that hasn't been that easy for a lot of these large companies that have invested in brands. Suddenly they are not being able to understand the language on one side or another. Like, because these entrepreneurs are many times moved from passion, they are not wrong things, but they are not necessarily solving all the different pieces of the equation to truly bring a brand with value that can work in the long term.
You talk about values quite a lot, which is great, obviously. And one of the values that we've been talking earlier about is authenticity, which is obviously a very big thing for you. Authenticity in brand, coherence in the proposition you guys have, and among all of your portfolio. Can you please tell us what's authenticity for you, really, and what is an authentic brand?
Authenticity is an experience. It's a cognitive process in which the rational and the emotional are connected. It's the way you feel about something. It's when you perceive something is credible. It's when the coherence in which things are delivered to you, you being the part observing the element that we will judge as authentic, that when you have that interconnection, you see that things are in its place. It's not fake. It's not something you are trying to seduce you with things that are not based in reality or that are incongruent to. No? When you want to be liked by everybody, you sound fake because you transform yourself in whatever is needed in order to be liked. A lot of brands can be like that, and eventually that generates this feeling of not being authentic, and eventually the loyalty and the long-term relationship of brands and consumers and bartenders become weak. So what we have tried to do is first to be respected before to be loved. And respect comes from the fact that what you are transmitting is transparent, and the other side can see that you rather prefer to be as a brand, as a proposition, what you are, than to ensure they feel attracted to you. When people start to see that, maybe the first time they try you, the first time they get exposed to that brand, they may say, well, I like it, but wow, this is respectful. And little by little, you start to conquest their heart. I think in these long-term love relationships that are based in trust, that are based in a more, in respect and in recognition. So I would say the story of Casa Lumbre is a lot about that. Sometimes we have been the underdogs. That happened with us, with some of the brands. Sometimes no, sometimes we have moved really fast into success, or we have bring something very original that has no competitor, and that got adopted. That have happened with a few of our products. But if you ask me, I think authenticity can only be built in a conscious way. You need an identity, a set of features that describe and define what you are. You need to have a narrative to put that out there and explain it, make them fluid, explicit, flexible, and then the listener will get impacted by what you have to share. And when they start to believe you, then you have a strong brand. Even if you sell whatever you are selling. Sometimes brands can sell a lot really fast and they can become a fad, something that is successful for a period of time, but is not a century-long success, not a brand that stands on something really strong. And in Casa Lumbre, not only me, Moy, Danny, and the team, we are really trying to bring innovation that is meaningful. Things that, yes, are new, that, yes, will imply for a new consumer to open themselves to something they probably doesn't know, with a new perspective, with a new liquid, with a new product. But at the end of the day, we are looking into a long-term relationship with the consumer.
I'm going to just pick up on this because you're obviously great innovators in the mezcal and tequila and Mexican spirits world, in a category which is very much rooted into deep heritage and tradition. So I wanted to know how you find, if you can describe it, how you find the balance in between being credible, as you said, within a category such as mezcal, for instance, and innovating. Like, what kind of step of thoughts you go through before say, like, we're gonna launch this product, we're gonna do the first Cristalino mezcal, or we're gonna do a sotol, for instance.
Completely. I mean, when you go to you look back into the heritage of things, the place of origin, the raw material, the traditional way of producing things, you have really strong basis to make something that has the potential of being successful. But if you want to be unique, you will need to step apart of that. So it's like a risky thing. In a way, you want to be the thing that everybody identifies. You want to feel authentic. But if you are just the same as everything else, then what you are. So we have always been offering, in a great extent, the core of the category, like in a mezcal, being traditionally produced, cooked in a underground oven, fermented, wild, which is started, all of that. But there has to be something you stand for. The reason of existing of your brand will necessarily be connected to that element that is different. And you not always succeed, because when you bring something different of what people is accustomed to, you are forcing them to cross a door. In a way, you generate as well a cost of adoption. There's a cost of adoption is they have to move from where they are into something else. For example, we have a whiskey from Mexico, different process. We nixtamalize it. Corn is the central thing. If you go there, if you taste it, you will see how congruent it is. But it's still different. And that difference sometimes takes time to be valued, to be understood, to be, right? So, but that's what makes me, or the brand, what the brand is. And when the brand is something, eventually you own something. So it's a challenge, and not necessarily every time you are successful or identically successful as you want. Sometimes you are probably more advanced in time. For example, right now with Noche Luna here, a beautiful sotol, we actively decided to build a category that is almost inexistent. It's a category that solves almost nothing. We are probably one of the biggest sotol brands, and we sold 2,009 liter cases last year, which is a very small quantity when you look at any agave spirit. But someone has to do that job, right?
And
so it's a process of adoption.
In different countries that might your brand be perceived different than Mexico, I'm going to explain myself better. How important is the Mexican market feedback for your products before sending them overseas, for instance? Or is that the case that maybe some European countries, for instance, perceive sotol as a new category better or differently?
I love your
Mexican?
question. In today's world, there's a big loop and a big interconnections of how brands may be successfully in place and another. We have as a rule, as a policy, that we always will invest and make big effort in being successful in Mexico. We are a Mexican brand. We believe that Mexico has to be there. Many brands don't think like that. I mean, if you think in large brands like Patron, they were nothing in Mexico, and they were huge in the US. If you think in Del Maguey, for example, they are still nothing in Mexico. They were huge, particularly in the US, UK, and a little bit in Europe. We think we are a Mexican company, we have to be successful. So yes, but also I have to acknowledge that these days, when a Mexican travels and they see a Mexican brand in another country and they discover they value that product outside, they revalue that brand within Mexico. So the success in Mexico is also directly related with the success elsewhere. And we in Casa Lumbre consider that there are certain cities, certain markets that are fundamental where brands has to establish, even if the sales are not that big, because they are places with great taste, with very mature consumers, and we know that if they accept us in whatever level, that is building our brand. The UK market, for example, is important. The Italian market is important. I mean, these cultures that value, or cities that values great food, that values great cocktails, are fundamental for building brands. But we cannot forget Mexico. I don't think authenticity from Mexican brands can be built if you are nobody in Mexico.
Thank you.
So many brands of tequila
The other way around.
To the other way around. They are totally focused in the US market because that's where the money is coming. Mexico is not a good business for alcohol because we have very high taxes. The policies around allows a lot of corrupting kind of deals where large companies can ask about you should not accept these brands, and they block you, and that's not illegal or directly illegal. In other countries, that's not illegal.
And what's the role of a small producer of agaves or tequila right now in Mexico? Like, what's the tiny business working in this category playing at the moment?
The beautiful thing is that, like when you establish something and becomes the standard, then the small expressions that are different gain a lot of energy. So when I started with Montelobos, the entire market of mezcal was owned by American entrepreneurs. I mean, where the Americans telling an Americanized story to the American market and to the European market. Today, it's wonderful to see traditional mezcal and the small brand owners, people with families in Oaxaca and in the tequila business, Oaxaca from mezcal and Jalisco from tequila, bringing their products into the US and in Mexico and gaining the recognition they require. But in a way, we prepare that market in order for them to be seen. You know, it's like it happens a lot in history when if you have a moment in which the romanticism is really strong, then the following tendency in literature will be almost the directly opposite. You know, you are writing things about dystopia and negative things. Like it's very common in that things goes in cycles, right? We believe in democracy, and now it's very fashionable that you want a really strong man in power because that's what thinks you're gonna get successful. So in a way, establishing a category is like, I'm thankful for these gringos, American guys who brought their more lame, maybe Tex-Mex style to explain or caricaturize, you know, like a cartoonish way of the indigenous Mexico. But at the end, then that gave chances for the real Mexican propositions to be seen, and people were feeling that as more authentic. And that's what's happening. Now, these expressions are better received and better understood. Mexico brand, I mean, Mexico as a brand, as a country brand, has grown very much and is still growing around the world. The food is growing around the world. Mexican restaurants are expanding, even in Europe, that you have such
Absolutely.
a regionalistic cuisine. I mean, in Italy, you walk around and maybe one sushi here, one sushi there, and some store food, but you are in love with your own food, and I think you are not wrong. It's amazing. The same happened in Spain, in other places. But little by little, particularly in the spirits world, you have a very dynamic and open space for exploration. And you are a culture that is fascinated with flavors and sensations, where the Italians have been exposed to wonderful and complex experiences, sensorially speaking. And that's why mezcal, tequila, sotol can be so well received. It's not necessarily the same in other cultures, I have to say. In others that food and culture is not relevant, where people are not so interested in the story behind of what you are eating, maybe things are not taken so seriously. And now we cannot talk about entire countries. You have to talk about cities. Of course, maybe the Anglo-Saxons are less sophisticated for sure, but if you go to cities, those cities may be super sophisticated, like London is, or Copenhagen is, or I mean, these places. But then in other regions, the entire country is sophisticated because they have a culture that are really well developed in that sense.
Talk about Mexico and the expansion of Mexico and Mexican brands, which is obviously great. How does the Mexican government play a role into it, specifically about maybe changing tequila disciplinaries or the regulations and the rules about making it? Is it something which is always updating, or is he stuck
So
in
there
time?
are the
And if it is updating, is he updating in a good way from your perspective?
okay. So I'm gonna split it in two bits. First,
Please.
the government has had different moments in recent history. Let's say in the 25 years of my professional life, there's been moments in which the government has invested a lot in promoting Mexico as a country and the product from there. Right now, we are not so much in that moment, but there was institutions created for that, and we had a thing called Pro Mexico in the past, who was very actively promoting the Mexico to be seen outside. And of course, our local products became important. We imported the concept of denomination of origin from Europe, and we started to implement it 35, 40 years ago. And now we have different products that follows these kind of standards. The regulation is a more complex issue because yes, the government is like a witness, but it's a lot of lobbying, and not lobbying like love, lobbying with the other being, which means people pulling its own interests, and they have ways of putting the most knowledgeable people in the table and the most influential people in the table. But unfortunately, so many times the regulations are created without respecting the tradition, without considering the small farmers, without considering the small producers. I mean, I'm not gonna say they are not here at all, but the big interests are many times there, and that explains why we have a mixto, for example, for tequila, which I'm not necessarily say is wrong, but because yeah, you can make a tequila that is inexpensive, but I think we could do more for recognizing family-owned brands and historic taste in ways like more smaller denominations could generate. In Mexico, we make a very strange blend between product definition and denomination, which make a very big mess. We should have tequila, and then we should have regional tequilas. But we don't go that small. We rather prefer to have some of the largest denominations in the world. Mezcal is the largest denomination in the world, and that's a nonsense. If you want to express a region, make a definition of product and allow multiple denominations to exist. We don't have that, unfortunately. So we have not such a well-designed regulation in order to truly put ourselves there. But at least we have some. And I think Mexico is sunny and is energetic and is friendly and is full of light and music and intense flavor. And all of that more and more is in the mindset of people around the world. And that's what's opening doors for new categories and new products. We in Casa Lumbre are very fortunate to work from Mexico towards the world because it's a great proposition.
I'm going to ask you one last question about the category. How do you see the next 5 years for Mexican spirits? And if you had to change one single rule, the most important rule about nowadays production, what would you change?
Well, so for the first one, I think we have ahead really bright 5 years, and there's many reasons for that. I think raw material right now is inexpensive. I would like to be more fair because right now it's in the fairness. Now farmers are losing, but they were making 5 times in the unfairness, but in the opposite side the last 3 years, with all honesty. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to make this agreement in which everybody wins. We are all the time, someone is winning a lot and the other's winning very little, and the opposite. But right now, farmers are not having a good time. But beyond that, because the prices of agave are accessible, there will be a lot of opportunity to offer good quality brands at lower prices in a moment in which the world is spending a crisis, I would say, economically. And I think there will be a lot of potential introductions that will bring more people into the category, even with cheaper prices. And I think agave is a great bet for the future of spirits. We have the most water use efficient plant on earth, so the water finger, like the water impact for kilo of sugar is very low in agave. You have still to respect things like not destroying forests in order to expand the area where you grow agave. That's an important one. And also to try to do a well-done agriculture where you don't overuse shed and cheaty herbicides that you don't really require. But that's going to be important. But I feel there will be a very expansive moment for those things. We've seen growth non-stoppable, and we know that we had issues in the alcohol industry, but that was because COVID was a strange thing. When you look at the line of growth, it has been a continuum and will be a continuum. And I think agave will expand while other propositions may contract. So agave has a very big future, I believe. And agave not only in the form of alcohol, which is something I'm very into it. I think agave is such a flavorful raw material that maybe could be the base for making refreshing drinks, could be, of course, making non-alcs like replicas or distillati. I'm already doing a brand like that. But truly utilizing agave as a source of flavor into the future in the non-alc and alc world, I think there's a lot of space there for Mexican true agave, but also through other raw materials. I mean, we are doing whiskey with corn, chilies, oranges. We have multiple fruits. We have a lot of wonderful things in Mexico that we can share and that has its own typicity and its own roots within the country.
Thank you so much, Ivan.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for everything.